Assalamu alaikum, may peace be upon you. This is a response to your video, is beating your wife okay? The first thing I wanted to say to you is that I don't think I have one definite conclusion to give. What I think I can share with you is what other people have said about this particular verse and this particular topic, so maybe you can, get more pieces of information together. Before we begin, I'd like to tell you that I believe Islam is not a collection of verses and of phrases that can be used out of context and can be pulled off, just to justify one behavior or another. Islam is a complete religion that promotes certain core values, and among those values are freedom and are justice. So every time we come across something that it seems to cause oppression or injustice, we need to stop and take a step back and say, is this really oppression and injustice? And if it is, then we need to question ourselves and think, well, is this the meaning that the verse or the phrase or the saying should have? Or could this be something that if used in a certain way is okay, but if used in another way is absolutely, not good? All these are things that we need to take into consideration before we make a conclusion about any subject. Having said that, I'll tell you what other people have said about this. The first thing is, for example, that some scholars have disputed that the meaning of that verse is actually to beat your wives. In Arabic, the verb used is idrbuhunna, which is derived from the verb daraba, which could mean to beat. But what scholars have done is that they have gone to the Quran and they have seen in what other instances this verb has been used. And they have realized that in no other instance in the Quran this verse is used in a way to mean, beat someone up. Then what they did is then they went, to see other possible meanings of this verb, and they realized that what would suit better to this context would be actually to translate the verb as to leave your wife. If you read the verse then, and the verse after it, you would see that this explanation could actually make sense, because then the verse, would more or less say, if you fear ill conduct from your wife, admonish her, then leave the bed, and then leave her. And the verse after that would say, well, if you're fearing this breach, you leaving her, then appoint arbiters. So, what can I say? For me, it does make somewhat of sense. The second explanation that other scholars have given is that actually the steps done before this beat is actually meant to stop violence and to stop domestic violence. Because think about it, most of the time, let's imagine, these cavemen that say, oh yeah, I can beat my wife if she misbehaves. But most of the time, actually all of the time, people beat others out of anger and out of rage, not out of, oh, I am following the Quranic verse. So when the caveman gets angry at his wife, he's like, oh, I'm gonna beat her. But then he looks at the Quran and says, oops, I can't beat her right away. First, I have to admonish her, talk to her about it. Then I have to separate from the bed, and only then I can beat her. So he's like, oh, okay, I'm going to establish all the steps before this. So by the time he does all these steps, the anger is gone. And because the anger is gone, then there's no, impulse to beat. So if actually people would follow these steps, people would have time to cool off to realize that there's no need to use violence. And so that is, another explanation that people have given. The third explanation is that actually this verse was an improvement for women at the time of the Prophet, because women actually, at the time of the Prophet, actually the first step that people used, that men used, was to beat their wives. But, the Quran then introduced two previous steps that you had to do to try to discourage actually wife beating. Finally, as I said before, Islam is a religion of justice, so anything that produces injustice and oppresses women should be denounced loudly and strongly. And all of us women need to stand up together and say no to this. Right now, in this time, using any kind of physical admonition with any woman, it's not only not allowed, but it's a crime and should not be permitted. And we need to denounce. And every time we hear an imam telling a woman who is in an abusive relationship, oh no sister, stay with your husband, he will get better, or when people ask, oh, your husband beat you up, so what did you do to provoke him? We need to denounce that, and we need to say that this is wrong. Any kind of physical violence against women, it's wrong. We need to protect those women. We cannot send them back to their abusive husband. We cannot tell them that they have to put up with that. The husbands, the women need to leave their husbands, at least temporarily. The husbands need to get help to see if they can, they can overcome this illness that they have. And then, we can talk and maybe the marriage can be reunited. But leaving women in an abusive relationships, that is just wrong. And usually it causes more ills than good. And that's it. I hope this helped. Assalamu alaikum.